Leonardo da Vinci, the man everyone knows as a genius, the Renaissance man. What if Da Vinci had been born in Africa? Do you think he would still be as great and celebrated as he is today? Here's the truth. Africa has always had minds just as sharp and creative as that of Da Vinci. You'll be thinking, what are we discussing here again today? But this is not just some fantasy. It is a fact that history has hidden for too long. And in this video, we will take you from Renaissance Italy to ancient Timbuktu, and from the Nile Golden Age to the bronzeworking empires that is now in the present-day Nigeria, to reveal African polymaths, scientists, artists, and inventors whose genius rivaled that of Da Vinci's. This is a celebration of shared brilliance across continents, and a challenge to colonial narratives that seems to forget, or let's say easily erase this achievement from history. Before we proceed, let's get to know who Leonardo da Vinci is. Leonardo da Vinci's full name was Leonardo da Vinci, and he lived from 1452 to 1519. He is often described as the archetype of the Renaissance man, a polymath with insatiable curiosity. Born in Vinci, Italy, Da Vinci excelled as a painter, sculptor, engineer, architect, anatomist, and inventor. His famous artworks include the enigmatic Mona Lisa and the sacred mural The Last Supper. And yet, painting was only one facet of his genius. He pursued studies in anatomy, dissecting human cadavers to draw the best accurate anatomical sketches of his time. He investigated mechanics and engineering, sketching visionary machines like tanks and concentrated solar mirrors. Da Vinci even ventured into flight, designing contraptions inspired by birds, including a sort of proto-helicopter, a helical aircraft, and winged flying machine called ornithopters. Centuries ahead of the Wright brothers, he conceptualized parachutes and gliders on paper. What drove Da Vinci was a philosophy of boundless inquiry. He believes knowledge from all disciplines was interconnected and endlessly worth seeking. As the Metropolitan Museum of Art notes, his curiosity and insatiable hunger for knowledge never left him. He treated drawing as a scientific tool, sketching swirling water currents, the anatomy of the art, or the mechanics of a bird swing with equal fervor. Da Vinci trained in Florence under Master Ferruccio, but he spent years in Milan, Rome, and ultimately died in France, serving royal patrons, yet always pursuing his own investigations. Da Vinci's legacy is preserved not only in paintings but in his notebooks, an astonishing archive of his mind. He kept copious notes, scribbling ideas in mirror writing Italian, right to left to avoid smuggling his left-hand scripts. Over 7,000 pages of his notes survive, bound posthumously into collections known as codices. For example, the Codex Aronde at the British Library and the Codex Atlanticus in Milan Ambrosiana Library compile his drawing and writings. This notebook covers practically every subject: mechanics, the flow of rivers, astronomy, optics, architectures, and the flight of birds, all demonstrating Da Vinci's intense curiosity. Da Vinci himself described the notebook as a collection without order, drawn from many papers, which I have copied here, hoping to arrange them later. A humbling reflection of a mind overflowing with ideas. In essence, Leonardo da Vinci stands in Western history as a towering genius who embraced all knowledge, both arts and sciences, in pursuit of truth. Before we meet Da Vinci's intellectual peers in Africa, let's get to know what polymath is and who is a polymath. A polymath is an individual whose knowledge spans many different subjects. Someone who draws on diverse fields to solve problems or create new ideas. The concept embodies a Renaissance idea. The humanists believe that humans have limited capacity for development. In the 15th to 16th centuries, a Renaissance man or woman was expected to cultivate talent in multiple disciplines: arts, science, literature, philosophy, even athletics, aiming to develop fully as a human being. Leonardo da Vinci is often cited as a prime example of a Renaissance polymath, but he was not alone in this spirit. We also have others like Michelangelo, Raphael, Niccolo Machiavelli, and among others. Renaissance Europe esteemed such versatility. However, the polymathic tradition exists in many cultures. In essence, whenever and wherever individuals push the boundaries of several fields at once, weaving knowledge into new patterns, we are witnessing a polymath at work. Now, let's turn to Africa, where long before and even after Da Vinci's era, African polymaths and innovators were making their marks, often hidden in plain sight. One of the best places to find Da Vinci's of Africa is Timbuktu in present-day Mali. Far from the European imagination of a remote mythical city, Timbuktu was a thriving center of learning and culture from the 13th to 16th centuries. It hosted the famed University of Sankore and other madrasas, attracting scholars from across West Africa and the Islamic world. By the 1500s, around Da Vinci's time, Timbuktu was home to tens of thousands of manuscripts on subjects as varied as theology, law, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, poetry, and history. Modern estimates says between 400,000 and 700,000 manuscripts were preserved in Timbuktu and its region, many kept by families in private libraries. These texts, some dating to the 11th century, are indicative of the high level of civilization attained by West Africans during the Middle Ages. During Timbuktu's golden age, books were a major commodity, more valuable than gold. Travelers like Leo Africanus marveled that many handwritten books were imported from Barbary, that is North Africa, and are sold in Timbuktu. There is more profit made from this commerce than from all other merchandise. In other words, knowledge was Timbuktu's richest trade. The city bustled with scholars, judges, and teachers, all part of the cosmopolitan intelligentsia. Let's highlight two polymaths of Timbuktu, Ahmad Baba at Timbuktu and Abdul al-Rahman al-Saadi. Ahmad Baba lived between 1556 to 1627 and was called Timbuktu's greatest scholar, a jurist, theologian, historian, and prolific writer. Born near Timbuktu, he studied Islamic law and theology, and he became renowned for his learning and integrity. In 1591, when Moroccan forces invaded Songhai, the empire ruling Timbuktu, Ahmad Baba was accused of subversion and exiled to Marrakesh. Even in captivity, he was allowed to teach and he produced important works. His legal opinion, fatwas, were noted for clarity and deep knowledge. Ahmad Baba compiled a biographical dictionary of notable scholars and jurists, which remained an important historical source. After returning to Timbuktu in 1608, he wrote a treatise on the population of the Western Sudan and even an Arabic grammar that influenced education in West Africa. He was also a famed book collector. One account claims his personal library of some 1,600 volumes was partly seized when he was exiled. To his peers, Ahmad Baba was known as the unique peer of his time, a testimony to his polymathic stature. Abdurrahman al-Saadi, who lived from 1596 to 1656, was another intellectual giant of Timbuktu. He authored Tariq al-Sudan, the history of the Sudan, a detailed chronicle of the Songhai Empire and surrounding regions. Writing in Arabic in the mid-17th century, al-Saadi recorded the lineage of kings, the founding of cities, and events up to the Moroccan conquest. His chronicle is a crucial historical text, preserving African perspective on African history. Al-Saadi and others like Mahmoud Kati, the author of Tariq al-Fatash, not only mastered historiography but also genealogy, poetry, and statecraft. They were true Renaissance men of the Sahel, though they lived in a later era and different contexts than Leonardo da Vinci. Timbuktu scholars did not work in isolation. They built on the rich tradition of learning in Africa. In their manuscripts, we find discussion of mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and pharmacology. For instance, texts describing surgical techniques, the movement of celestial bodies, or formulas for herbal remedies. An example, a 14th century medical manuscript from Timbuktu detailed treatment for ailments just as a European manuscript of the same era would. Evidence that scientific inquiry in Africa was alive and well. The manuscripts cover every aspect of human endeavor, reflecting a curriculum as diverse as any Renaissance university. In short, Timbuktu in the 1500s had its Da Vinci's. Polymaths like Ahmad Baba and al-Saadi, who excelled in scholarship, taught students, as Sankore University reportedly had up to 25,000 students at its height, and wrote works that synthesized law, theology, and science. Their legacy, preserved in fragile manuscripts, shows that African intellect sparkles as brightly as Europe's, even as colonial narratives later dimmed that light. Let's travel back another 2,000 or 3,000 years and we encounter one of earliest known polymaths in history, an African genius revered in his time and beyond, Imhotep of ancient Egypt, who lived around 2650 BCE and was a physician, architect, physician, and priest. Truly a multi-talented mind. He served Pharaoh Diosa of the 3rd dynasty and is traditionally credited as the architect of the Step Pyramid of Saqqara, the first monumental stone pyramid. Imhotep's accomplishments earned him divine honor as he was deified as a god of medicine in later periods. Imhotep's legends illustrate how African civilization valued knowledge across disciplines. As one modern source notes, Imhotep from 2655 to 2600 BC was an Egyptian polymath considered to be the first architect, engineer, and physician in recorded history. He designed grand structures, advised on state matters, and also healed the sick without resorting to magical thinking common in his era. Imhotep's approach to illness was notable empirical, a precursor to rational medicine. He is said to have written medical teachings, though none survived directly under his name. Many believe that later Egyptian medical texts drew on a tradition he exemplified. Speaking of those texts, ancient Egyptian science and medicine reached remarkable heights. Two famous papyri from around 1500 BCE demonstrate this. The Edwin Smith Surgical Papyrus is a textbook on trauma surgery unparalleled in antiquity. It presents 48 clinical cases of injuries, from head wounds to spinal fractures, and for each gives examination methods, diagnosis, and treatment. The approach is rational and systematic. The physician is instructed to observe symptoms like examining a man with a broken nose to determine if the case is treatable, and then either proceed with intervention or declare it untreatable. Remarkably, the text even describes the brain and its coverings, making the earliest known reference to the brain in medical literature. This surgical papyrus reads like a field manual that a war doctor might carry, which is why scholars respect it originated from around 1600 BCE, but copies knowledge from Imhotep's time, the Old Kingdom, around 2600 BCE. In contrast, Europe will not develop such methodological surgery manuals until millennia later. Another text, the Ebers Papyrus, around 1550 BCE, is essentially a pharmacopoeia and medical encyclopedia. It contains about 700 formulas and remedies for ailments ranging from crocodile bites to toenails pain. Remedies include herbal prescriptions, mineral treatments, and yes, some incantations. You know the ancient medicine mixed science and magic. For example, the Ebers Papyrus gives a recipe to help asthma. In early herbs, eaten on a bricks, an instruction for diagnosing pregnancy. While some treatments were superstition by today's standard, many shows empirical experimentation. It even addresses heart disease and diabetes like symptoms, noting that the heart vessels lead to every limb and intuition of the circulatory system. What do these achievements mean? They show that by the time of classical Greece, Africans like the Egyptian physician had already been practicing scientific method for centuries. Imhotep and his successors were effectively Renaissance men long before the Renaissance, mastering architecture, medicine, and administration under one name. Leonardo da Vinci, for his part, studied anatomy 4,000 years after Imhotep. Da Vinci dissected human bodies in the late 15th century to produce stunning anatomical drawings, such as the famous Vitruvian Man, and detailed sketches of the heart and fetus. One can draw an echo between Da Vinci and Imhotep. Both sought knowledge of the human body to elevate the art of healing or depiction. And while Da Vinci anatomical notes remained unpublished in his lifetime, Egyptian medical knowledge was systematically recorded and taught, indicating an unbroken chain of knowledge transmission in Africa. And we have to get this clear. Polymathic is not only about science, it is also about artistic and technical mastery. During Europe's late medieval period, in what might be called Africa's own Renaissance, the artisans of Ile-Ife in modern Nigeria and the earlier Nok culture achieved feats of artistry and engineering that rival anything of Da Vinci or his contemporaries produced in sculptures and metallurgy. The Yoruba holy city of Ile-Ife from 1100 to 1400 CE was the center of an extraordinary flourishing of arts. Ife artists produced life-size heads and figures cast in bronze and brass, using the lost wax technique. These sculptures are astonishing for their naturalism and precision. The faces have delicate features, serene expression, and even pores and scarification marks rendered in detail. One brass egg discovered in Ile-Ife, now in the British Museum, is so refined that when it was first presented to Europeans in the early 20th century, scholars could not believe it was African-made. In fact, the features were so realistic that wide theories arose. Some claim that Ife's art must have Greek influence and even that Ife was the lost city of Atlantis. Of course, these claims were baseless. The art of Ife was wholly African and emerged from a continuous local tradition. Modern art historians rightly recognize Ife bronze as one of the highest achievements of world arts. Why mention this in a video about polymaths? Because the creation of this artwork required deep understanding of chemistry, like the alloying metals, engineering, the furnace temperature, and mathematics, the proportions and symmetry, combined with aesthetic genius. An Ife artist had to be implicitly an engineer and chemist. The lost wax cast process itself is complex. Sculptors modeled the figures in wax, encased it in clay, then heated it so the wax drained out and molten metal could be poured in. Mastery of this technique in Ife indicates significant empirical knowledge. Ife artists around 1300 CE could cast metal sculpture as fine as any bronze cast in Renaissance Florence, a parallel evolution of technology and arts. In essence, these African artisans were polymaths of practice, much like Da Vinci was a polymath of theory and art. And their accomplishments were centuries before Europeans even knew of sub-Saharan African artistic sophistication. Going further back, the Nok culture of Nigeria around 500 BCE to 200 CE provides evidence of an even earlier African mastery of technology. The Nok are famous for their terracotta sculptures, expressive human and African figures expertly modeled and fired in clay. But just as important, Nok culture was among the earliest in the world to smelt iron. Archaeological findings suggest that by 750 to 500 BCE, the Nok people were smelting iron ore to produce tools, independently developing an Iron Age technology around the same time or earlier than ironworking spread in Europe. So at a time when classical Greeks were using bronze, West Africa may have been forging iron weapons and farming implements. Nok iron tools and the spread of metallurgy will later influence other West African states, like the Ife and the Benin. The combination of arts and metallurgy in Nok and later Ife and Benin societies shows an applied polymathy. For example, the Nok have individuals who were at once blacksmiths, sculptors, and community technologists. Their knowledge, though not written, was passed down in practice. When one sees a Nok terracotta head or an Ife bronze, one is seeing the output of centuries of accumulated experimentation in clays, ores, and kiln temperatures, a science and art that was Africa's equivalent to anything in Da Vinci's notebook on machines or Michelangelo chisel mark on marble. Leonardo da Vinci famously dreamt of human flight. He sketched flying machines and studied how birds soars, compiling his findings in the Codex on the Flight of Birds around 1505. But here is an intriguing fact. African history too has legends and records of individuals who attempted flight, inspired by observing birds. These stories remind us that innovative mind exists everywhere. One legendary figure often cited Abbas Ibn Finas of Cordoba in Islamic Spain around the 9th century. He was of Berber origin, which is North Africa and thus part of the broader African Islamic world. Around 875 CE, Ibn Finas built a pair of wings from wood and silk, feathered with bird plumage, and jumped from a height. According to historical accounts, he glided a considerable distance before crash landing, surviving with minor injuries. This is arguably the first documented human flight attempt in history. Like Da Vinci, Ibn Finas studied birds' flights. Unlike Da Vinci, he actually tested his device. While Ibn Finas is geographically associated with Spain, his heritage ties him to the continuum of Africa and Islamic innovation, showing that the spirit of flight was alive in Africans' mind long before airplanes. Fast forward to 1904 in Katsina, northern Nigeria, a local inventor named Mahmoud reportedly built a large wooden wing and tried to fly from a tall structure. Inspired by watching birds and likely unaware that the Wright brother had just flown the first airplane in 1903. He made his daring jump. Story says he managed a short glide before falling. Why this mainly survived through oral history? It shows how the spirit of invention is universal. Imagine at the same time airplanes were being built in America, an ambitious man in the city of Katsina was chasing the dream of flight in his own way. Even if some details of Mahmoud's attempts are lost to legend, its inclusion in local law, underscores something important. The capacity for invention knows no cultural boundary. Da Vinci sketches a flying machine with pedal power wings in a different context. African inventors also envisioned humans taken to the sky like birds. The difference is Da Vinci's ideas were preserved and celebrated, while many African inventors remain unsung due to the disruption of colonialism and the lack of record keeping. Nonetheless, the echoes of genius is clear. Whether it is designing a glider, charting the stars, or performing surgery, African innovators have been on the same quest as Da Vinci and his European peers. So, I know you want to ask this question. If Africa had Da Vinci caliber geniuses, why are their names not as famous? The answer lies in colonialism and Eurocentric historiography. Let's break it down. For centuries, colonial powers and biased historians systematically dismissed or ignored Africans' accomplishments. A practice some scholars bluntly call epistemicide, the killing of knowledge. European narratives often portray Africa as a continent without history or innovation, a false claim that served to justify colonial domination. Perhaps the most notorious example is Oxford historian Trevor Roper, who declared in 1963, perhaps in the future there will be some African history to teach, but at present there is none. Only the history of Europeans in Africa, the rest is darkness. Such statement from a highly educated figure no less shows the blatant denial that African people ever achieved anything worthy of record. This dismissive attitude led to the silencing of African genius in global narratives. African achievements were often attributed to outsiders or deemed anomalous. Let's recall how the exquisite Ife bronze head were initially credited to Atlantis or ancient European, anything but acknowledging that African artists could produce masterworks on their own. When the Rhinestone city of Great Zimbabwe were discovered in the 19th century, some colonial archaeologists insisted they must have been built by Phoenicians or Israelites, refusing to believe sub-Saharan Africans could erect complex stone architecture. In the Sahel, French colonial officers scoffed at the idea that Timbuktu's manuscripts had scientific merit, often letting them decay or even looting them as curiosities rather than preserving them as libraries of knowledge. Colonial powers also actively destroyed or hid evidence of African high civilization. A good example is in 1932, when archaeologists in South Africa found the golden rhinoceros of Mapungubwe, a stunning gold figure from the 13th century African kingdom. The apartheid regime kept this fact hidden for decades, because such an intricate artifact made by Africans some 800 years ago went against the racist apartheid philosophy. In West Africa, when the Moroccan forces sacked Timbuktu in 1591, they exiled scholars like Ahmad Baba and carted away many manuscripts. Later, during French colonization, schools in Mali taught French literature and European history, while neglecting local intellectual heritage, causing generations to grow up unaware of Ahmad Baba or Al-Sadi. Similarly, Nigeria colonial curriculum lauded Da Vinci and said nothing of Imhotep, the Nok culture, the Benin or the Ifes. The result was a gaping disconnect. Africa's own people were often not taught about their geniuses, and the rest of the world remained ignorant by design. European museums filled up with Benin bronzes, Ethiopian manuscripts, and Egyptian antiquities, but framed them as trophies of a primitive world rather than the product of sophisticated society. This is why, only in recent years, projects are underway to rediscover and digitize the Timbuktu's manuscript to include African scholars in history textbooks and to demand the return of looted artifacts to their rightful homes. Knowing this history of erasure, it becomes even more important to tell the stories we have told here. Leonardo da Vinci and his African counterpart belong side by side in the annals of human achievements. The difference is not in innate capabilities but in historical feasibility. Da Vinci had the virtue of Renaissance Europe's record keeping and later European prestige. African polymaths were marginalized by colonial interruption of their civilization trajectories. If Da Vinci was an African, we began with this provocative title. The truth is, Leonardo da Vinci's spirit was African, in the sense that the same spark of creative, cross-disciplinary brilliance shown in Africa's great minds. From Timbuktu to Tibis and from Ife to Katsina, Africa produced scholars and visionaries who deserve to be spoken of in the same breath as the European Renaissance masters. The tragedy is that their names and work were sidelined by history. But this is changing. African historians, scholars, and communities are restoring these legacies. translating and publishing old manuscripts, celebrating ancient universities, and teaching new generations about their heritage. In celebrating Leonardo da Vinci, we do not diminish him by pointing out he had peers in other lands. Rather, we enrich the global story of innovation. African's Da Vinci, be it a university rector like Ahmad Baba, a medical pioneer like Imhotep, an artistic virtuoso in medieval Nigeria, or an intrepid inventor like the would-be flight master Mahmoud, all shows that genius knows no color or continent. Colonialism may have muted their echoes, but today we can hear them clearly and proudly. Da Vinci once wrote in his notebook, "All knowledge which ends in words will die as quickly as it came to life, with the exception of the written word, which is its mechanical parts." Thankfully, both Da Vinci's and Timbuktu's words were written and preserved. It is now unto us to read them together, to acknowledge that human story of genius is a tapestry woven from every corner of the world. Let's celebrate African brilliance as enthusiastically as we do Europeans, and in doing so, finally giving this forgotten polymath their rightful in the pantheon of world history.